So today I just wanted to talk a bit about Sfiras Omer. The truth is, last night I was looking in the news, and in New York there was a very big incident, which is that they outfitted a special 747 airplane to bring the shuttle Enterprise. I don't know who's familiar with this. To New York. What's fascinating about it is that Enterprise never flew. You know, it was a prototype shuttle. And even so, there's huge baram about it because obviously the shuttle program ended. But in its place, the Discovery shuttle was flown to Washington to replace Enterprise, which was at Smithsonian. And I don't know how many of you used to watch the old takeoffs, but I remember as a kid when I used to watch it. So it was really an incredible moment that you have the big countdown, and all of a sudden it shoots off, and that's incredible. And when we talk about Sfira, the first thing that comes to mind is that it's actually not a countdown, it's a count up. And that's part of the question really is that if we're anticipating something, so in true anticipation, you generally count down the days. You look on your calendar and you're like, I got 5 days to go, 4 days to go. So why is it by Sfira that we have an entire flip? That by Sfira it's a count up. That's question number one. We're going to throw out many questions and then hopefully we'll bring it all together. That's question number one. Question number two is, when do we start counting the Sfira? On the second day of Pesach. But if it's truly accounting from Pesach until Shavuos, then we should really start counting on the first day, not on the second day. So what's going on over here? That's question number two. Question number three is that what is this counting all about? That if you look at the actual counting, what do we call it? We call it Sfiras HaOmer, which is the counting of the Omer. And what's the Omer? The Omer is the special carbon. It's a Minchas HaOmer, which was brought of barley on the second day of Pesach in order to permit all the grains of that year. That's the whole concept of Yashan. If you ever see on a package that it says that something is Yashan, that means that it was harvested before Pesach, before this carbon was brought. That's really what the carbon is all about. So why is it called, what's the counting have to do with the Omer, with that carbon? Even though the carbon was brought on the second day of Pesach. But why is it specifically about the counting? And in truth, if the counting is an anticipation of Shavuos, there should be a mention of the giving of the Torah in the counting. And we don't find any of that. So again, just to recap, that first question is, why is it that we have a count up? We should have a countdown in anticipation. The second question is that why does it start on the second day of Pesach? It should start on the first. The third question is, why is it called Sfiras HaOmer? What does the Omer have to do with anything? And the fourth question is, why isn't the Torah mentioned at all? And I'll throw in a fifth question, that why do we have 49 days of counting? We should have 50 days of counting, because the 50th day is Shavuos. So it's as though we almost get there. We count 49 days, and then we lose it. So what's going on over here? Anybody want to take a stab?
Stab the first one.
Yeah, go ahead.
The first one is basically that the Torah is up here.
Right.
Okay? It's almost as if we're taking the steps towards a particular goal. And when you take the steps, you take step one, step two, step three. And that's how you're counting. They have accomplished this to get to the point, which is the Torah. Okay. Or the other one you can say is that Bnei Yisrael were in the 49th level of Tumah. Mm-hmm. So now we are one level away, 2 levels away, 3 levels away, until we get to 49. It's all right. We have passed all the 49 levels, and now we're ready to receive the Torah.
That's a very interesting idea that you're saying. I mean, part of the challenge over here is that the traditional understanding of Sfiras HaOmer is that there is an anticipation, that we have Pesach over here, we have Shavuos over here, and we're looking forward to the holiday of Shavuos and counting those days. So what you're saying is actually that there's a different type of counting, that the counting isn't tortuous, so we'll talk about that. That's an interesting idea. Anybody who have any other thoughts?
I think it's the difference between the rabbinic and derisive reasons for the Sfira, is that derisive Right, we're counting away from the Omer.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically what we're doing, and remembering the Omer as we do it. I think it's become rabbinically as a link to Shavuos, but D'oraisa, it's not really a link to Shavuos.
And what would it be, D'oraisa? What's the connection between Omer and Shavuos?
Well, I think between Omer and Shavuos?
Yeah.
I think D'oraisa there isn't that link.
But Spirit Omer is for sure,
It
at
ends
one
before
point,
Shavuos.
it was mentioned in the Torah. Right? So it's D'oraisa. It's quite possible that today it's not. But definitely at that point it is D'oraisa. So how does that work out?
No, the D'oraisa part is actually bringing the Omer itself. It's not,
Right,
it's not
correct,
connected to
yeah.
Shavuos, is what I'm saying. It's
Oh,
not
so you're
actually-
saying, okay.
D'oraisa is
So
not
then
connected
again,
to Shavuos.
so that only buttresses the question, why would it be Sfiras HaOmer? Why are we calling it, why is it connected to the Omer? It should be connected to Sfiras Matan Torah, Sfiras Shavuos. Why is it Sfiras HaOmer? These are important things. So let's just get to the way the Sefer Chinuch, right, the way he explains the mitzvah of Sfira. So I'll read it inside, and he says, Bishar She'er mitzvah. Right, Al Tzad Pshat. He says, what's the root? The Sefer Chinuch is one of the greatest elaborators on the understandings of the mitzvahs, and goes into the causes, or not so much the reasons, but an appreciation for us. And that's what he says in the introduction, that obviously we can never fathom the deeper levels of every mitzvah, but definitely on the surface level we're given certain understandings. So he says, Lefisha kol ikarin shal Yisrael eina ela Torah. He says, what's the point of the Jewish people? Is the Torah. It's Rashi at the beginning of Bereshis. He says that why was the world created? Bereshis, right? B'shvil HaTorah sh'nikar Bereshis, because the Torah is called Bereshis. Okay? So he says, HaTorah nivru sh'mayim va'aretz v'Yisrael, that because of the Torah, the world is created, the Jewish people are created, right? And he continues on. I'll skip some of it, but you could see it inside. And he says, and therefore, because the Torah is so fundamental to our essence, to the essence of the world, kihi kali karan shal Yisrael, because that is the foundation and the essence of the Jewish people, uba'avura nigalu, and because of that we were redeemed from Egypt, because of the Torah, ve'alu l'chol hagdula she'alu Allah, and we rose to all of the grandeur which was bestowed upon the Jewish people. Nitztavinu limnais mimachar siyam tev shel Pesach. So we were commanded to count from the second day of Pesach ad yom nesinas haTorah, until the giving of the Torah. And this is actually, where everybody talks about it, that it's that link, right? The Sefer Chinuch mentions it. Laharis b'nafshenu. So what's the goal? And this is the crux. It says, in order to display in our souls hachefetz hagadol, the intense desire, al hayim hanichbad hanichzav l'lavenu, right? That this incredible day, which is gathered in our hearts, ke'eved yishav tzel, right? V'yimna tamid masayava ha'es hanichzav elav sheyatzel l'cheres. It's as though a slave is told that there's a certain day of freedom, and he counts to that day, right? Which again begs to the question: why are we counting up? We should still be counting down. But we'll get to that. Because the counting displays to a person that our entire desire and being is waiting for that day. That's what we're doing. That's why we count the Omer, as if to say, that we're saying this such and such is the count of days that have passed from the count already, which means that we are looking back. We're saying how many days have passed already that have brought us closer to our goal. It's flipping it. This is the way the Chinuch looks at it, right? So we're 22 days have passed from, which means that had these 22 days not passed, we would still be waiting another 22 days. And that's how we're looking at it. You could read this inside, but that's it's really incredible. And then he throws this in. Don't ask yourself, Imkain, if this is so, if most of these days pass, why don't we count down? Why don't we write that there are only 10 days left, 5 days left? He says, you're right. Maybe we should. but we shouldn't switch it in between, right? Here, let me just finish this, and then V'im Tishal, and if you'll ask, he asked all these questions. He says, why don't we start it from the first day? Why do we only start on the second day? Hatshuva, the answer is because the first day of Pesach is to commemorate the leaving, the Exodus from Egypt. Because what does Yetzias Mitzrayim really represent? And that's why we mention it every Shabbos. We invoke the commemoration of the creation of the world and Yetzias Mitzrayim. And why do we commemorate both of those? Is because the Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Exodus, really displays and demonstrates, as the Ramchal and many others write, it demonstrates that Hashem was recreating the world and that He's still in control. Right? There are people, they're called deists, that they believe that the world, or deism it's called, that they believe that God created the world and He left. He abdicated the throne. And so obviously Yetzias Mitzrayim is that Hashem came back and He showed that He's in control. So that's the first day of Pesach. So so we don't want to confuse it and throw it. It's a concept of Ein Ma'arif and Simcha B'Simcha that you don't combine, just like we don't have a Chasana on Chol HaMoed, so you don't combine two Simchas. So we have the Simcha of the creation of the world, and then we have the Simcha, a separate Simcha of looking forward towards Yetzias Mitzrayim and towards the towards Kabbalah Satorah and towards the Karban. So we don't want to combine the two. So you have the first day of Pesach is for creation of the world, so Hashem's still in control. Second day is the Karban, and we're looking forward to Shavuos. And that's how he says it. Okay? Now this is, you can look at it inside, it's actually very fascinating. The problem is that it still begs many questions. That it's a nice idea, and it's very important what the Chinuch said, that you have the second day, right, is obviously we don't want to combine, but there has to be a bit more to it, because at the end of the day, if the entire reason why we left Mitzrayim was in order to get the Torah, so it's not really such a combining of simchas, it's the same thing. Yeah, did you have a question? You had a question earlier, yeah.
I was going to say, the counting up, to me, it makes more sense, because it's like, when I turn 21, I'm going to inherit $1 million. So, now I hit 19, now I hit 20. I'm looking forward to my 21st birthday because I get $1 million.
Is that what people do? Do people do that usually?
50 days
I've never inherited $1 million.
Yeah.
Before your 21st birthday, you're going to be counting down 49 days, 48 days.
You're still looking forward to...
Yeah, you're definitely looking forward, but if you have a calendar, if you ever look in offices, right, that they have the big project date or you have the big thermometers or whatever else it is, right, so they're doing their big X's, what's past, what's going on. So you're right, there is such a concept, and that's how the Chinuch tries to flip it. He's flipping the idea, look behind you, what's completed. But it's still, the question isn't, it's like there's a Yiddish saying that the question's better than the answer, yeah.
I mean, maybe the point here is it's not about the destination, it's about the journey, physically, spiritually, and each day is valuable in and of itself, right? We get so focused on the goal,
right,
you miss the value, the growth, the opportunities that you have, each and every day.
That's a very good point. So let me just jump on that.
He downplays the significance of bringing the Omer. He downplays tremendously.
Exactly, because
it's a great event.
The bringing of the Omer, this is part of the whole problem. The problem is that it's Sfiras Omer. The Chinuch mentions that the real goal is the giving of the Torah, and that's one of the questions that we ask. What's the connection to the Omer? Why is it called Sfiras Omer? Why isn't it called Matan Torah? Why isn't it called something else? Why are we so hinged on this Omer part? And in many ways, it's actually sandwiched between two events. If you read in the Torah itself, right, so it mentions there are two psukim over here. And it says that Chol Sa'ar, says, Karban Reishis Takrivu Aisam LaHashem, that you shall offer them as a first fruit offering to Hashem, Vela Mizbeach Layalu L'Reach Nechech, and you should not bring it up to the Mizbeach. So what's that talking about? What's Karban Reishis? The first Karban? So if we look in Rashi over here, Rashi says that Karban Reishis Shtei HaLechem Shel Atzeres. It's the Shtei HaLechem. It's the special two bread offering that we bring on Shavuos, and this is an exception, that it's made out of chametz. No karbanis in the Beis Hamikdash, which we know minchas were made out of. There were two exceptions, but this was one of the exceptions that the Shtei Alechem was brought, and also there was another one, which is Karban Toda. So that's again why we don't say Mizmal Soda on Pesach or on Pesach at all, because it was also chametz. But these were the two exceptions. Okay, so that's what it says. So there's the Shtei Halechem, and that's what it's referring to, and that's why it's not brought on the Mizbech. And then there's another pasuk in pasuk Yudalet, Bim Takriv Minchas Bikurim Lashem, and if you bring a mincha of Bikurim to Hashem, so and what's that referring to? It's another concept of Minchas Bikurim. So this again. Minchas Bikurim, b'minchas ha'omer, ha'kasim b'daber. Okay, so we find that there are two concepts that are called Bikurim. Okay, that they're called the first fruit offerings to Hashem as a national sacrifice. And that is the Karban ha'omer, and the second one is the Shtei Halechem.
Bookends.
Exactly, it's two bookends. In many ways, that's really what's going on over here. That what's going on is that we're actually counting from the Omer. We're going to try to delve in a little bit more to understand, the nuance over here. But we're counting from the Omer, which was a barley offering, which permitted the eating of all the grains, to the Shtei Halechem, which was made out of wheat, on Shavuos. Right? And that's actually what we're doing, that we're counting in between the two. But according to the Chinuch doesn't mention any of that. That's everything was Yashan.
So we're not talking about harvesting the wheat prior to Shavuos, or are we?
Yeah. The Shtei Halechem is what was brought, which is they didn't harvest. The Karban Omer is that they harvested the barley, right? And that's what they brought. As opposed to the Shtei Halechem was two breads that they offered. But today actually in Israel, all flour is Yashan, which is because it's a suffix d'oraisa in Israel. Outside of Israel, it gets very complicated, which is not the topic of today's discussion. But the truth is, it's very problematic. A lot of the heterim that were relied upon in Europe was based on the fact that they weren't able to source the flour.
Right.
So it was all suffix where the flour's from. Today, with globalization and all the technology, we know exactly when everything was harvested. So it gets a little problematic. So there are many people who have taken on Yashan in recent years, and the truth is, it's ironic in Yiddishkeit that Chal Yisrael is probably a lot more popular than Yashan. Although Yashan has a much firmer basis, from it. It's just ironic in that sense, but that's the world we live in.
And it might make the Omer much more important to us.
Yes, without a doubt.
It became a focus.
Yeah, and the truth is, there's a fellow in Muncie who publishes a booklet about all the Yashan places, and I remember when I was younger, I used to publish it. Now it is rampant, even where I come from in Detroit. You have the bakeries are Yashan, the pizza shops are Yashan. It's really taken off. So I guess awareness has resulted. But in Eretz Yisrael, everything's Yashan. That's just the reality out there. So just a lot of what I'll be talking about comes from my father and also from Reb Pinkus. And the Sefer is a great Sefer. It's the Sichas from Reb Pinkus, and it's on Spiros HaOmer. So let's just get back to the original question. I'll throw out one of the questions, which is, why is it the second day of Pesach, which the Chinuch addresses? Then why do we start on the second day of Pesach? And I think that will help frame this entire understanding. That what event happened on the second day of Pesach, and why are we starting from the second day of Pesach? So, historically, where were the Jewish people when they left Mitzrayim on the second day of Pesach? What?
Just outside Mitzrayim.
They were just outside Mitzrayim, and where did they go? So,
towards the Yam Suf.
Exactly, towards the Yam Suf, towards the desert, exactly. Okay, and that's what happened. And if you read in Yirmiyahu, it says, Kayamar Hashem, right? That Hashem said, Zacharti lachesed nu'arayach. I've remembered, right, the chesed of your youth, right? Avas klulei sayach, that it's the love. Lechtech acharai b'midbar b'eretz le'tzirua, that you followed me, you followed after me into a desolate wasteland. And that's really what happened on the second day of Pesach. That on the second day of Pesach, it wasn't so much that we forged into a nation. That happened on the first day of Pesach. What happened on the second day of Pesach is that we chose Hashem. The first day of Pesach is when God chose us. The second day of Pesach is when Hashem said, go after me to the desert. The Jewish people didn't know what their future. Obviously, they were slaves, so they all ran out of Egypt, right? But the truth, or according to some, 20% left Egypt, right? But whoever it was the second stage. It was, where are you going after you leave Egypt? They said, just follow me. And you don't even know where you're going. And as you mentioned, the journey, you're just coming, you're just following me to wherever I tell you to go. And part of the idea actually is that there's a story my father tells over, but it's not in Talayeris, it's in the other one on the Parsha. We have it on the shelf here. So there's an incredible story that's told about Rav Chaim Berlin. Rav Chaim Berlin, the famous yeshiva in New York, it's named after him. But he was the Rav in Moscow. His father was the famous Netziv. And he was the Rav. Rav Chaim Berlin was the Rav in Moscow. And he had a brother of Meir Berlin who was very famous in the one of the big founders of, I don't know exactly his role in the Zionist, pardon? Bar Ilan Street is Meir Bar Ilan, exactly. So he's a big name. Bar Ilan University is named after him as well. But he had a brother of Chaim Berlin, and Rav Chaim Berlin was one time in his shul in Moscow, and this fellow comes in who looked like an absolute non-Jew. And he comes over to Rav Chaim Berlin, and he says, Rabbi, could I speak to you after davening? And he said, sure, and after davening, he pulls him aside, and he says, could I speak to you privately in another room? And he wasn't used to this, but Rav Berlin said, fine, okay. And he goes into another room, and he says, you don't know me, but I live in this town, in the village that's very far away from here, and there are no Jews there whatsoever except for me, and there's one doctor, that's it, but nobody knows I'm Jewish, and I just had a baby boy, and I want to have a bris. I want my boy to have a bris, but if anybody finds out, they're going to kill me, because the business that I'm in, I'm not selling jewelry, I'm not selling anything else. I actually sell Christian articles, the crosses and geshkas and everything else. He says, that's my business. Everybody thinks, I go to church every Sunday. I'm a real Christian, like you tell. And they actually tell the story that, just an aside, that I forget where I heard this. My father told me over the story that in the 60s, somebody was in the Vatican at Mass, and they saw that these people were busy selling these, Christian articles. And he saw tucked in under one of the seller shirts was a Magen David. This guy goes up. He says, how could you be selling all this stuff? He says, you think I'm the only one? Look at all these guys. They're all Jewish. He says, because if they weren't Jewish, they would all get swept up in the whole mass. They wouldn't be able to sell anything. So we're the ones who sell. So that was that. Don't try this at home. But so he tells Rav Chaim Berlin, he says, listen, this is what I do for a living, but I need to have a bris, so I need it to be very discreet, and I know that you're a mole, so what could he do for me? And he says, so Rav Chaim Berlin said, I actually know that doctor in your city, and tell him that on the 8th day that I'll be coming, and word should have it that I'm a doctor, right, and I'm coming to check on the patient, and you'll bring that doctor along, and that doctor will serve as the sandik, and we'll have a kosher bris. And that's exactly what happened. And on that day he came to the city, and again it was really a non-Jewish place, no Jews around. He came in very discreetly, performed the bris, and left. And not long afterwards, this man, the villager, the father of the baby, came back to Rav Chaim Berlin, and he told him that he just really came to thank him. And Rav Chaim Berlin said, I don't understand you. You have no Jewish connection whatsoever. Nothing. Why in the world would you give your son a bris milah? Why would you do this? And he said, it's a good question. He says, I made a decision on my own that this is what type of life I'm going to lead. But my son isn't going to have that decision. And I want to give him at least some opening so he could make that decision on his own. And the story is told that Rav Chaim Berlin, every Tisha B'Av, he would read, on Chol Moed of just now on Chol Moed Pesach, we read Shir Shirim, right? So whenever it would talk about the Yonah, that there's a pasuk over there that speaks about the young bird that never leaves its parent. And whenever he would read that pasuk, he would start to cry. I said, why would you start to cry? What was it? So his Talmud asked him, he said, what's going on over here? He said, because I always remember that story. That when this person who was so far away, who had no connection whatsoever, right, and he still wanted to give something to his child. And he says that that's the pshat of Yenas. I have to find the pasuk again. But that the idea is that just like a bird, this dove, the baby could go away from its parent, but it'll never turn a corner. It'll always be within eyesight. And said that that's the idea of the Jewish people. And the truth is, and that's really, I think that when they bring it down, they bring it in connection to this concept of Lech Techa Acharai Bamidbar, that the Jewish people decided that they're going to follow after Hashem, even though they had no real connection. At the time, it says, according to the Medrash, that they totally fell away from all Jewish observances, except for 3 things. That's what it seems, right? That they didn't change their name, their language, their dress, right? But that was it. Otherwise, they were entirely assimilated, you know?
Was the mother of the baby Jewish?
Yeah, the mother was Jewish, you know? We have stories, I could tell you stories myself, that I know of people, similar type of stories, that assimilation is so rampant, but in those days and age, there was such a sacrifice to do anything, and even so. And you could imagine that the Jewish people at that time, they had nothing going for them. You know, they were slaves in Egypt, they were all demoralized, they had nothing. And they still decided, or at least 20% of them decided to follow Hashem into the desert. And that's why it's on the second day of Pesach. That answers that question. That what's the second day? The second day is the one we chose Hashem, and that's the concept of the Torah. But we still didn't answer all the other questions. So let's, we're short on time, so let me just get through some of it. Okay, so let's try to understand, why is it that we count up? Why aren't we counting down? Okay, so Rav Pinkus says an unbelievable idea that I've actually written about. It says that we find with Avram Avinu, that when Hashem commanded Avram to leave his birthplace, what did he say? He said, Lech lecha me'artzecha u'mimoladzecha u'mibeis avicha. He says, leave your land, your birthplace, and your father's house. And where should you go? El ha'aretz asher areka. Go to the land that I will show you. Didn't even tell him where he's going. So the question is, why is that? Why didn't he tell him, go directly to the land of Canaan? Right? All the Mefarshim asks. Why did he say first, go leave this place, leave your land, your birthplace, your father's place? Yeah. He should have said, just go straight. And why? So again, why is he telling him where to leave? And why is he telling him just this confused concept? He's just telling him, go to some place out there in the hinterlands. So what I've seen it in Reb Hirsch, and a lot of the German commentators explain it this way, and he doesn't quote where he's coming from, but that's where I've seen it. He says that there's 2 concepts going on over here. That before Avram Avinu was able to become the leader of the Jewish people, he first had to deracinate all of those, pretty much the grime that built up from all those generations, from the time of Enosh, right? All this idolatry and everything else. And the way Rav Hirsch puts it is that what's your land? So your land is really your concepts, your environment. You know, your language that you speak, your Weltanschauung. That's the land. That's me'artzecha. Mimoladitzcha. It's your hometown. You root for the Blue Jays. You know, that's what it is. That you feel certain. I'm from Detroit. I was never a sports fan, but somebody just told me that the Tigers are doing all right. I don't know if it's true or not. You know, and there's still a decent feeling. You know, I should get some nachas from Detroit, even though I don't know how well the Red Wings are doing. They were knocked out, but. You know, this is what people tell me. I don't follow sports, but you still get a certain tinge of pride. Then when you hear somebody from your hometown, you know, like not to mention anything, but down the block we have a very famous Canadian singer, Justin Bieber. You know, comes from not far away from here. They have an annual festival over there, and at that town, I'm telling you, that's their big claim to fame over there. They could have whatever festival, but the fact that they have this famous guy from that town, so that's a certain connection that you have with that town. And what Avram was told is, he said, you have to erase all of that. You have to get rid of all of that part that built up, which is a larger reality than your state and your city and your father's house. Just get rid of it all. And once you're able to cleanse yourself of that, then you go to this undisclosed place. And so why did he have to tell him El Haaretz Asher Areka? Why couldn't he tell him where he was going? So Rav Pinkus, the way he puts it, is he says that it's impossible for him to grasp what Eretz Yisrael is. It's impossible to tell him, go to Eretz Yisrael. He has no clue what it's like. When Aaron was dying, right? So Moshe asked him, do you know where you're going? He said, no. Do you know what it's like? No. And Moshe said, if only you knew. If only you knew. Why? Because it's impossible to appreciate what it's like to be over there. I mean, the way Rav Pinkus puts it, it says that there are many people who are Baalei Tshuva today. And many times, I have a friend of mine who actually had a story that he was, I met him at the coastal, he's from Detroit, and he went on a date with this girl, with another firm girl, and they go to the hotel lobby on the first date, and they meet, and they go back. Fine. So he met a secular friend the next day, and he says, "What's going on in your life? What are you doing?" So he said, "Listen, I've become religious. I start dating." He says, "So what's the dating process like?" He says, "Yeah, I picked up the girl. I took her to a hotel." What? The first day? Yeah. So it's a little shocked, but because there's no concept even, there's no framework in order to discuss these matters. So you tell somebody who's a Baal Tshuva, tell somebody who's still secular. He says, "What's it like being a Baal Tshuva?" You can't explain it. You can't explain what it's like having a family. You can't explain what it's like to have a Shabbos, a community, learning Torah. It's impossible. It's either you're there or you're not there. That's how it's like. So you could give them a taste. You could tell them come to some classes, come experience some challah, but you can't give them the full experience, and that's what it's about. Right? And so that's what happened with the giving of the Torah. That why is it 49 days? Why isn't it 50 days? It's because it has to be El Haaretz Asher Areka. It has to be the land that I'll show you. It's no place that I'm telling you where you're going today. We could only count 49 days, but we have no clue what we're getting to. We don't even begin to understand what Torah is until we actually get to the Torah. And that's the sweetness of Torah. So what does that mean? So what are we counting to? So what are we counting to 49 if we're not counting to the actual giving of the Torah, because we don't even know what the Torah is to talk about getting to the Torah? So it's only 49 days. So Rav Pinkus says something fascinating, and actually thrown something from my father as well, this whole concept. Many of them, I've seen this in many places, that the idea really is that the Omer, what is Omer? Omer is made of barley. What's barley? Barley is animal food. Who eats barley? It's actually interesting. When else do we find that somebody is fed barley? So we have there's a parallel by the Sota as well, and the other parallel, which is this is Taisus, but it's mentioned in Chazal in several places, that if Beis Din knew that somebody was guilty of capital punishment, but there were technicalities, so they would lock him up, and they would feed him barley until his stomach would explode. That they would do that because barley is not human feed, just isn't. That obviously we could eat it and it could be refined, but in its essence, it's animal. And that's what we start off. On Pesach, we start off eating barley. On Shavuos, what do we eat? It's the Shea Lechem, which is made of wheat, made of fine wheat. And what are we doing over those 49 days? From the second day of Pesach, when we decided to follow after Hashem, when we gave up our own identity, and we said, we're going to follow you blindly into the desert, wherever you want to take us, we will follow you. You always have these stories of people who travel across the globe for, this person who ran away. So that's what it's like, that the Jewish people just ran after Hashem into the desert. And what happens over the next 49 days? So what happened was that it's not a time for counting to the giving of the Torah. This is where Pinkus puts it. It says it's a counting up for us as individuals. That we were at, like you mentioned, we were at the 49th level of Tumah in Mitzrayim. And what we had to do was build ourselves up to become a Kli Kibble, to become that vessel that's worthy of receiving the Torah. A 12th grade Rabbi, Yeshiva Staten Island, his name is Rabbi Newman, he would always tell us, he says, I'm trying to pour in milk to this cup, but the cup is so dirty. First I have to spend all my time cleaning out the cup to pour in the milk. But by the time I clean out the cup, I have no more time left. So that's what we're trying to do, is that we're trying to clean ourselves up. and to really refocus on that. So what are we counting up towards? So we're not counting up towards the giving of the Torah in that sense. That we can't do. That's why there aren't 50 days. There are only 49 days. What we're doing is that we're counting in ourselves. We're counting, like you mentioned, the steps of growth that we have achieved over this time period. And that's why we count a double type of counting. That it's not just the Omer that we count the 7 weeks, right? 7 complete weeks, or it's just the days, but we count twofold. We count first each day as its own accomplishment, and then when you have that full week, we're able to look back and look at our accomplishments of where we've grown. So when we say that it's 22 days, we're saying we have 22 days of growth that we've achieved up till now. This is obviously not like the Sefer HaChinuch. That goes without saying. And that's really what the avoda of Sfiras HaOmer is all about. That the avoda of Sfiras HaOmer is not about just counting up vacuous days and seeing when's the next event in Judaism. It's about a personal mission and journey, like you mentioned, that it's about the journey. It's not about the destination. And what happens when we get to 49? Only then, once we achieve our personal 49, that we grew 49 steps, could we then find out what Torah is all about. Only when we hit the 49th are we prepared to go into a Shavuos. And that's really what we're doing on Shavuos and this whole totality of the Sfiras HaOmer. And that's really why, obviously, we didn't get into the whole mystical realm over here, but if you notice, underneath every day, it says a day. You know, Netzach Shabbat, Hayt Shabbat, Tefer Shabbat, Tefer, whatever that is. But obviously in the Zohar and those other concepts, there's a whole there's a whole higher realm that's going on over here. That we're preparing ourselves on a spiritual state, on a mystical state towards the receiving of the Torah. But even without that, we're just keeping, to folks like myself, that I'm not into the whole mystical thing. So, in that level, what we're trying to do, just to reiterate, is that we start on the second day, because the second day is when we decided to make that choice our own. That we're following Hashem, we're going into the desert, that's when we chose God. And why is it called Sfiras HaOmer? Why is it about the Omer? Why isn't it about the giving of the Torah? And that we explain because the Torah is elusive. We have no concept. It's like that secular person. There's no concept what Torah is. You can't count up to something that you don't know. We're not looking forward to the Torah. We don't even know what the Torah is. So what are we counting? We're not going to delude ourselves. So what we are counting is we're counting the Omer. We're counting from that day when we ate that barley. And we're saying how many steps have we risen from that barley? From the animal feet. And how many times, as we know, that we are comprised, as the Ramchal says, and many others say, that we're comprised obviously of a body and a soul. And our body is our animalistic tendencies, our souls, our spiritual tendencies, and our entire struggle throughout life is balancing those two. And originally, before Adam committed the original sin, so there was this equilibrium in the world. And all Adam had to do was to balance it, to really tip that balance towards the neshama a little more, and then there would have been eternity. There would have been that utopian era. Instead, he shifted it the other way. And in this world, there's more animalistic tendencies than spiritual tendencies by nature. And that's where death comes in, that we have to die in order to achieve that equilibrium once again. We can't achieve it in this world. But unlike the Christianity, unlike that theology, right, we're not born with an innate inability to achieve greatness. We just fully achieve that upon death. But we achieve our potential within this world. That we could still do. So that's really what our avoda is in this world, is that we're trying to balance, again, that soul part, and that's what our struggle is most highlighted during this time period. That we're struggling from that Omer to the Shtei Alechem, to becoming human. When I was studying in the Mir Yeshiva with Rav Nathan Tzvi Finkel, so during this time period, he would always make these big incentives. That he would give out extra money for people who would learn 12 hours a day. Just 3 Sdarim with the full, 4 hours each, and he would go crazy. That there are no vacations now, no off Shabbos. He wants everybody in Yeshiva on Shabbos. He wants to make this happen. And this is the time period many people have accustomed to learn Masechta, Sota, or others that have 49 pages, and there's this concept as well of learning that there are 48 ways, that the Torah is acquired by. So you learn that Mishnah and Perkei Avos. So there are many of these ideas that are built in this time period to really bring it all together. So just to reiterate that we started off with several questions. We started off with the question, why is it the second day? Why not the first day? And that we answered, that's the day that we chose Hashem. Aside from what the Sefer HaChinuch mentions, right, that Ein Ma'arvin Simcha B'Simcha, that we don't want to combine the two Simchas, but that's the idea that we stuck with. We asked the question, why is it Karban HaOmer, right, why is it Tzviras HaOmer? So the way we're answering that, and we're also answering the question, why is it 49 days, why is it 50 days, is because we're looking back at the animal feed, at the Omer, and we're seeing how far we've come from there. That's what we're doing. Right, which isn't so dissimilar from what the Sefer HaChinuch mentions. And that really brings it all together. And the truth is, hopefully, during this Spirit Omer, we'll take this opportunity to grow and to look at this time, that each day isn't, again, it's not a countdown. It's not looking, how many days left are there. We're looking how many days have we counted, have we achieved in our personal drive in life. And this time period is really a reflection for the Cheshbon HaNefesh that we take throughout the year. But it's really highlighted during this time period of achieving that goal from the Karban HaOmer until the Shtei HaLechem on Shavuos.